Hi, this is Daniel on the road here. I'm just beginning my trip to India for the detox, uh, 30-day detox training I'm going through. Hopefully, I'll get rid of this thing in the process. We don't know. But anyway, in the travels, I'm here in Cebu, starting in Cebu. I stay at the center of Nanda Marga, which is a spiritual organization focused on yoga. And it's kind of a watering hole, I think, in Cebu for people who have alternative way of thinking. A lot of different types of people come here from different religions, and we kind of congregate and talk. So this is one interesting man I met here. I thought he had an interesting story, so I'll just let him tell his story. Hang on here. Okay, and so I'm sorry, what was your name?
Ian.
Ian and Daniel. So he's from England, right?
Yes,
So and he's been living here in Cebu for 10 months, 10 years,
yes, I've been in Cebu for 10 years now and retired here, of course.
right?
And
He's 80 years old, by the way, right?
yes,
80?
80 years of
Doesn't
age,
look
yes.
80, right?
81 next birthday,
When? Which is when?
which is actually on Boxing Day, the 26th of December.
Okay.
And my lifelong love, really, has been for animals. I've always grown up with cats, actually, not a dog. I've only ever had one dog in my life, which is the love of my life. But anyway, sadly, the animals never live as long as we do, so sooner or later you do lose them. But anyway, the story that is perhaps pertinent is that soon after I arrived in Cebu, about 11 years ago, I became involved with an animal rescue centre, and we tend to care for street dogs and cats in need. Okay, there are many dogs and cats, street animals here, because unfortunately in the Philippines they don't hold animals in such a high stead that we do in the Western world. However, you can't help all the animals much as you would like to, so we have to restrict we're a charity, we have to restrict our help to the animals most in need. So that can be animals that have been hit and run, the animal's still alive. We try to, with social media nowadays, we can be made aware of such a situation quickly, and we go along on a motorcycle, and if the animal still survives, scoop it up and take it to the veterinary for assessment and treatment. Then it may have to be hospitalised, but if not, we take it back to our animal shelter, we nurse it back to health, and we try to find a home for it, which is not always easy. But the interesting bit of the story was that in the early days, I took a dog from the street, and its back end, it was a female dog, and its back end was hanging out. It looked as though it had had a prolapse, raw meat hanging out of the rear end. And I took this dog to the city veterinarian, and a very nice lady, that's the government veterinarian, and she said, "Oh, that dog has got what we call a TVT, a transmittable vaginal tumour." And she said, "It's actually cancer. But I think I can cure it." So she wrote a prescription and sent me packing to a specialist pharmacy to procure a drug called vincristine, which was quite expensive. But anyway, we paid for it. I took that back to the surgery in ice, and she made some of it up into an infusion, which she administered in the dog's vein as an infusion, a drip, which took maybe 15 minutes, and said, "Bring the dog back in 2 weeks for a second treatment." Well, a miracle happened, and within a week, that tumour had regressed back inside the dog. You could look at the rear end of the dog and it looked perfectly normal, like any female dog would appear. The dog did have 2 or 3 treatments, and it went on to live a normal life. And that has happened on several occasions since, maybe 3 or 4 times since. And every time that chemical, vincristine, has produced a cure for that particular type of cancer. And then last year, I myself was diagnosed with cancer. and it was cancer of the blood. The name was actually non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. That's what they found from the biopsy. And they suggested that I had chemotherapy. Well, I really didn't like the idea. And they said, we'll give you a booklet and you can read all about it, what the treatment will involve, da-da-da-da-da. And it actually listed the cocktail of drugs that would be infused into me. And one of the drugs was vincristine. So immediately I said, I'm going to have the chemo. And I did.
That's not something you would go for.
I wouldn't have considered it, I don't think. Well, I would have considered it, but I would have rejected the suggestion if I hadn't have known, if I hadn't have already seen the miracle that vincristine produced on those female dogs with my own eyes. So I had the chemotherapy for 6 months in the UK, and to all intents and purposes, I'm cured. I certainly feel very healthy. My blood chemistry is back to normal. There are no lumps and bumps anywhere. And subsequently, before I came back to Cebu a few weeks ago, I was having lunch and listening to the UK radio, and I came in the middle of a program, and it was a doctor who was telling a true story, actually, of a young woman who had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And her parents were in opposition to modern cancer treatments. They favoured the more natural treatments. Now, whether the young lady had ever taken the natural treatments, I don't know. I missed that part of the program. But she certainly didn't have conventional chemotherapy. And the doctor she died, unfortunately. And the doctor was saying if only she'd had the sense to have the chemotherapy, I'm sure we could have saved her life. Now, it certainly saved my life, and I'm grateful to the Almighty for being given a second chance. And I'm sure that that's my reward for caring for the animals. And indeed, before I was ill, I'd procured some land, leased some land to build a simple animal sanctuary where we could house a lot more of the sick street creatures. And of course, with being taken ill, I could never complete the building of it. So that's what I'm wanting to do now. And I'm sure also that the fact that that was my intent before I became ill, that's one of the things why God gave me the second chance. Because He wants me to finish the project also.
Okay.
So there we are.
Okay, thanks for sharing the
God bless
story.
you
So
all.
the bottom line is that the love for the animals gave you the clue to help you make the decision to take on a cell therapy that you wouldn't normally take on.
That's my belief.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks.